this is the Sherborn Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. I will call the meeting to order. I'll read the agenda and we'll vote to approve the agenda either as is or with any changes anyone has. So current meeting items, I've relabeled liaison reports, advisory reports. It just seemed like a better term. So we'll start with that. If anything, I've got a couple things, anything that people want to report back to the committee. And then the main thing for us to do is to begin with a preliminary discussion about budget guidance and COLA. And there are a number of elements of that we'll go through, talk about, and begin a preliminary discussion of where people think would be sensible for those things to land. And then we've got minutes from a prior meeting to go back and hopefully look at and hopefully approve. So any changes you want us to propose to the agenda? Then I welcome a motion to approve the agenda as read.
Second.
All right, and we'll do a roll call. Shelley. Aye. Paul.
Aye.
Aye.
Penn.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Okay, so 7 on that. Great. Okay. And Deb was going to introduce you, but it sounds like you already met Stephen.
Yeah, we
so
met, yeah.
Laura Howenstein, I think, will be joining us in a minute. She's another new member, and then Doug Kingsley being the other, but he's definitely not going to be here. Tonight. Okay, so on advisory reports, I've got a couple to start with, and then we'll open things up for anybody else. On our letter to the Regional School Committee, so we approved text at our last meeting. Capital Budget Committee approved text, so we are waiting on Dover. They've equivocated a little bit. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. I think they're meeting this week and trying to sort out what they want to do. There was, I think, some concern expressed by some as the letter kind of got circulated around Dover, whether it would be impinging on school committee autonomy. So I'm a little less hopeful than I was a month ago that we're going to get them on board. My sense is we want to get the letter sent over so that it gets there before they get seriously into their budget season. So I think my inclination, obviously, we need to kind of have a consensus on this, would be by the end of next week, they haven't gotten it together. We just send the letter, and if they want to subsequently, kind of add themselves as signatories, they can do that. But if their process gets more complicated and they have more things to talk about, that's great for them to do, but I think it would be helpful to kind of get an official copy of the letter over to the school committee. So obviously open to thoughts and comments about how we handle that, but that was kind of an initial thing. Yeah.
Question, would you, if we come to that idea, would you communicate that to Dover?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Of course. I kind of already have, in the sense of, I said, we'd like to get the letter out, and, I think the way I put it is, let's check in at the end of the week and see where things stand and sort out how to proceed, as kind of setting up that. I'd absolutely, kind of give them one last chance before we did that on our own. Does that generally seem reasonable to people, or?
Do you know when their next meeting is?
They're meeting this week. Both committees should be meeting this week, so they should, either have an answer, or there's one issue we need to sort out. Can you wait one more week for us to sort out this one other issue?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All right. And the other thing I was just going to mention, this was Penn's suggestion, which I thought was terrific, is just particularly for Stephen, new members, I will send around a copy of the section of the bylaws that describes advisory, just so everybody can have in their file the official version of what do the town bylaws say the committee should do. So I'll pull those pages out of the bylaws and send those around sometime later this week. Other thanks for the suggestion. Other reports, anything anybody wanted to bring back to the committee? Hey, Laura, come on in. Grab a seat. So Laura Howenstein just got here. And just to roll back, just Laura Deb Seifring, who's finance director and is a key player for all things advisory.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I give it my best shot.
And Laura's now sworn in as a, full-fledged voting member of advisory.
So she knows the secret handshake and everything?
Yes, we did that. We covered that. Not that different than the Boy Scout secret handshake, but whatever.
I don't know that one. You have to, now it's out of the bag.
Yeah. Any other reports or anything anybody wanted to bring back before we start talking? Okay, so then let's go on to talking about budget guidance and COLA. So I obviously sent some material around. I was going to spin through some of that in a minute. But before we get to that, just a few big picture thoughts. On schedule, I thought we'd have kind of an opening discussion tonight. People want to share sort of preliminary thoughts, views. I've got some data and so on, in that, and I've got a slightly updated version where I added a few new tidbits that maybe hopefully we'll set up a discussion. So, we'll talk about it tonight. I'm hoping that when we meet in 2 weeks on October 30th, that we can come to a final agreement on numbers, which would be COLA and budget guidance. And then we have a meeting on November 6th, and I'm hoping that then we can approve text of the letter. So once we have numbers and we've kind of had a full discussion, I think I can pretty quickly draft a letter that captures both the numbers and the general tenor of the discussion and circulate that draft ahead of time before that November 6th meeting. And the hope would be that, we can do whatever editing we need to do in that meeting if I don't get it right. But that by November 6th, we could finalize and get that sent out, which is kind of the time by which we need to do that for things to work well for budget folk. We will get a recommendation from the personnel board. So they're meeting Friday. They've pulled together, their set of numbers. They've talked to some other municipalities with what are other folks doing. And they're going to come to their view of what the right number for COLA in particular would be, I think on Friday. I think they'll get it done on Friday. They'll send that on to us. We can either follow the recommendation or not. It's gone both ways in past years. Their recommendation is meant to be an input to us. It's really this committee's call and decision for what, will go to town meeting. But it's very helpful to get their views on things. So we'll get that. We'll have that by our next meeting as an input. And then we'll, proceed and try to come up with numbers. Yeah, Penn.
Last year, their recommendation was in the form of a range. Is that typical?
They've done it both ways. I think, so I chatted with Vicky today and not that, they haven't made a decision yet, but my impression is they're gonna have a point estimate number, single number. I think that's what they're gonna come up with. But, we'll see where their conversation goes on Friday and what they decide to do.
Thanks.
Okay, so before talking about, numbers for COLA, budget guidance, and so on, I wanted to just briefly check in with folks on the meeting schedule I proposed. I can put it up. Why don't I put it up? If I can do that, so. Second here. This will make so. Starting with see if I can make that a little bigger. Okay. Big picture dates of when when different things happen. I'm proposing March 22nd for our Saturday all day public hearing. So that's one to definitely get on your calendars. We've done that in Zoom past years. Maybe we'll want to do it in person this year. We can talk about that as it gets closer. And then I won't go through these in any detail, but we had then the list of proposed meeting dates. Yeah, Shelley.
I just had a question. 12th is a Thursday. Do we-
Oh, I messed up then. What's the date of the Wednesday?
It's 11.
It should be the 11th. I intended the 11th. Thank you. Thanks for reading this carefully. Anything else that people saw, either mistakes like that I made in putting this together, or dates that seemed problematic? Yeah, Stephen.
Just as a process question, on January 8th, these groups are presenting to the advisory committee.
Yes.
The final budget is December 31. Do the liaisons meet with these departments prior to the final budget? Or is there just that week that they're going to be able to meet with those groups?
So we'll talk about liaisons more in a minute, but I actually think it would make sense for liaisons to touch base with budget makers before December 31. You know, get a sense of, you know, what big picture, what are you intending? Is there anything unusual, anything out of the ordinary? Any, you know, to sort of, and budget makers will know that well before December 31 when they actually submit final numbers. I think there'll be some departments where we're not doing anything unusual. It's just going to be straight, you know, straight up. There'll be others, well, that there's this particular thing we want to do that's going to be a little bit different. You know, hoping to get a favorable recommendation for advisory. So I think those conversations actually happen, you know, mid-late November, early December.
Okay, so once that letter goes out, that's kind of the triggering.
Yes.
To go ahead and make phone
Yeah,
calls.
yeah, that's like the starting bell.
Okay, very good.
All the budget makers will get this as well, so
Right.
they'll know that you'll be reaching out and who will be reaching out.
Yeah. As you saw in the guidance letter from last year, right, the guidance letter is, you know, includes the numbers of COLA budget guidance, you know, the draft, the text of the letter, but then also includes all the liaison assignments, all the scheduled dates, so that everybody knows, you know, here's the lay of the land. What we're proposing is the lay of the land for January, February, and March.
Very good, thank you.
What else? Yeah.
I will not be here physically on the 8th. I will be in Chile, so hopefully I can dial in. You know.
Okay, well, see how that goes. And I mean, I tried to think about when school vacation week and avoiding school vacation week and other things that seem like they automatically be problematic, but my expectation is just like Doug couldn't be here tonight, you know, they're just, it's just inevitable. People's schedules are complicated and they're, you know, no big deal. You know, everybody's gonna miss a meeting or two.
Then on the minutes, I'll need to get back to you on December 11th.
Okay.
'Cause the 13th is Emily's birthday, and we're going to New York,
Okay,
but I don't know how far in advance we're going.
yeah, okay. So, all right, so we'll come to that thing in a second. Any other thing on the schedule that people saw that? Okay, on the minutes rotation, that was just me. I put everybody in order. I thought we'd go through incumbent members first with minutes so that new members wouldn't be asked to do that until they'd been to a few more meetings and gotten a feel for how minutes go. No problem at all to organize trades. You know, if you're gone, we'll just switch, you know, we'll just flip it with somebody else. No problem at all on that. Anybody have any issues with the minutes, proposed minutes rotation?
No, but I noticed you skipped me for March 5th and went to 10, which that's fine. I just after Nora earlier and then 10 was after me, so it's okay.
Yeah, I was
I'm
just.
only in the rotation once. I would get, that was just like a
I was just.
time thing we were doing.
Just messing around a
Ken
little
likes
bit
those,
here and there.
very fun.
Just-
If it were anybody but you, Shelley, I'd say no, but in your
It
case.
didn't go unnoticed, and thank you.
Just messing around a little bit.
No, it's fine.
And thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that.
That's what I think.
Okay, again, I appreciate people look at these documents carefully. That doesn't happen every year when people just, yeah, whatever, and then, you know, 6 weeks from now, there's some problem because nobody looked at things. That's great. Okay, so then on liaisons, let me scroll down so that is on the screen, at least mostly. So my best shot at trying to kind of reasonably evenly distribute the work burden, insofar as I knew of particular interests that people had, trying to accommodate those. And just, trying to get people in places that I thought would work well. If there are any issues, something that you really wanted to do that I didn't put you down for, or the other way around, let me know. This is just a draft. You can shoot me an email, either, say something now or shoot me an email in the next couple days. And it is easy at this point to make adjustments because nobody's doing anything yet. Deb had some very helpful comments that I'm going to incorporate where some of these categories are committees that don't actually have budgets. And so those tend to be lighter work because it's really just kind of checking in and making sure there's nothing happening, either where there is something they're doing that has unusual, that has budget implications, or they're proposing a warrant article that, we would need to want to know about and kind of get up to speed on. So I will do a designation on this to highlight those. There are also some of these departments that are funded not directly from the operating budget, but from revolving funds. But we also will talk about and review those, but it's a little bit of a different kind of thing, like town forest principally raises money from firewood sales and so on. And so they are kind of self-financing farm pond too. So those are also a little bit different than the ones that are straight up operating budget. So I'm also going to designate those. And there were a few other small things that Deb caught with, I won't go through them now, but sort of the small glitches where I got something that wasn't quite right that I'll fix up. So the look of this will change a little bit, but I don't think it'll have any significant effect on assignments. To come back to Stephen's comment about liaison. So here would be my vision. Early November, we'll send out a guidance letter. That is sort of the starting bell for budget process. And I would say in the course of November, the right thing would be for advisory members to reach out to the budget makers who are the liaison. You may already know the person. If you don't, introduce yourself. I'm the advisory liaison. Just wanted to check in on anything that's happening with budgets out of the ordinary. Be available to answer questions, because sometimes questions are things that like, how would advisory react if we did X? That will be easier, I think, to answer for people who've had more time on advisory than for people who are new. But I think pretty quickly you'll get a sense of that. And the idea would be, if you learn something interesting, when we get to the next meeting with advisory reports, bring that back to the committee. And that becomes kind of an information conduit for the committee to have a sense, for everyone on the committee to have a sense of, what's coming up, what's going on, what are some of the issues that as we get to budget reviews in January, February, people can already start thinking about and have a little background on. I would also say it would be worth spending a little time for departments that you're liaison to look at last year's budget. I can make available the budget spreadsheets from last year and take a look at that and get a little bit familiar with just what are all the categories, what are the items. Some are quite simple, where there'll be sort of one line for expenses, supplies, one line for salaries. There are others, like say town buildings, where there's a whole set of lines, and it would be worth spending a little bit of time just getting a little familiarity with the budget, so that last year's budget, so that when you have a conversation with the budget maker, you're kind of primed to understand what are some of the issues and so on that budget.
That's the one,
makers
Laura,
may
that
be
you and I are
fronting.
working on together. DPW and town buildings, I think, is Laura and me together.
Yeah.
We can sync up beforehand if you want.
So you've done this one before?
No, but I was in the, so it's not the liaison last year. But kind of a lot of DPW conversations came before the committee. So I can kind of give you bring you up to speed about what we talked about last year.
That's great.
I tried for larger departments, Steve and Laura, when you were put on to pair you with somebody who'd been on the committee before. Not so much for some of the smaller things where there isn't going to be as much to do. Open it up for any issues, concerns around liaisons, questions. Again, if you have an assignment that you don't like, or there's one that you would like, easy to make trades in the next week or two. Yeah, no.
May I make a trade on October 30th for minutes taker, please?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry to go back that way.
Okay, we just,
Ken, can I switch with you from December 11th?
I'm not a guaranteed bet for that because my surgery is the next.
Oh, okay,
you said October 30th?
yes,
Okay, so I will just put an X through you for October 30th and we'll figure something out.
thank
We'll
you.
get somebody else in that. Yeah, great.
Maybe Shelley.
Sorry, Shelley, are you looking right now?
You want to
The thing is, the November, so I will be, I will be able to attend October 30th for about an hour online.
Okay,
Um,
okay. Do you want to just trade with November 6th or you?
I'll work it out. If
Perfect,
Somebody
okay,
can,
fine,
we'll
fine,
figure
we
it
can do that
out, but I
offline.
won't be here
Okay,
the
great,
next time.
okay, good. Anything else on liaisons?
Sorry.
I just because last year was my first year on advisory and it wasn't, I didn't feel like I fully understood and maybe for the benefit of our new members, just that there are some of these committees meet, I don't know that they all meet because I wasn't a liaison to all of them, but I was for the library and they met like online and I felt like there was an expectation that Natalie and I, when we did that we attend their monthly meeting just to kind of catch wind of things and then they see our faces and know who we are. So that is the next expectation, right? So just want you to be aware that if you have a committee that you're assigned to, right? Am I misspeaking? I just want to make sure it's clear because I don't know if they know that.
Yeah, no,
Because
that's,
I kind of figured it out, but I
Yeah.
didn't totally know it coming in and it's good to know that you need to kind of work that into your schedule
yeah,
too.
that's great. So, right, some of these, like the library, they have regular meetings. Some others as well. And I would say along the lines of what Shelley said, if it works out and you're available to do that, that's great. If you just go to one or two and just kind of say hi and sort of get a feel for that, you can always read minutes because minutes are getting posted. If you can't make meetings, definitely worth reading over minutes to just check, because if there's something coming up that's gonna be a deal, it's gonna show up in the minutes. And, that might be a prompt to, I need to get in touch, with somebody to find out more about that. But on Shelley's point, if it works on schedules to join in, that is a great way to keep track of what a group is doing and thinking.
And it's available on the web, I think it's on the town website, the schedules. You can
Oh.
go and see like when they meet, if they meet, I don't think they all have a meeting. But
Correct,
some of these bigger, like library and,
Planning board
Yes, the planning
does,
board does,
conservation
and-
commission does.
yeah, so some of them do, so just so you're aware, it's helpful.
And I was also just on that, I was gonna say, there's also, if you haven't found it yet, on the website, the town website, you can sign up to get notices. So you can get an email whenever a meeting is posted or whenever minutes are posted. So I get emails when any of the multitude of committees that I'm interested in post minutes. I get an email that says, hey, just posted minutes. So it's just a little digging on the website, you can find that. And that's a really nice way to just, if you can't be at a meeting, to just, okay, they posted minutes, let me have a look and check in. Ken?
Right, yeah, speaking of experiences, the thing I found with some of them is, once we send out, they get the guidance letter. What I heard from a couple is like, we're not increasing our budget, we meet our guidance, is that okay? And there was like, they felt no need for discussion. I thought, well, great, no need to discuss. So it's gonna vary from
Yep.
department to department.
Yeah, and some of these, like, the insurance advisory committee, unless an issue comes up, like the town were to explore changing, the provider for health insurance, then that might become a active thing. Otherwise, that's gonna be, nothing is gonna, some of these, nothing is gonna happen, and that's fine. And on the budget guidance, if it were a small department with budget guidance, hey, we're within guidance, probably not a lot to talk about. If a large department said we're within guidance, probably would be some things to talk about because there'd be some moving parts inside that would be of interest, and worth understanding more
Mhm.
thoroughly.
Yep.
What else? Jeremy, Deb, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so then,
One thing, Dan, I
oh,
guess
yeah.
a couple of these, I'll reach out to the liaisons and that there's no staff in currently filling the roles,
Right.
such as veterans and sustainability. So I'm happy to chat.
Okay.
Fill in on those.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's
In
helpful.
general, if you find that's the case, you'll reach out to someone. Anyway, I'm happy to help set you up. In a number of cases, they'll be reaching out to you because they're excited to talk to you. So
Yeah.
you may actually get bugged first by them.
And I just add to that, I am happy to answer, any questions if anything comes up. Particularly, for those who are doing this for the first time, if any issues, questions come up, I'm always happy to talk and provide whatever background I can. Okay, good. So let's talk budget guidance and COLA. So I don't have anything to share or show on budget guidance, but just to provide a little background on that, if we want to do that first. So that would be our guidance to department heads, budget makers, for other than wages, salaries, which would be covered by the COLA. What would our expectation be for budget change from last year? And for many years, I don't know exactly how many, but for a long time, that budget guidance has been zero, with the idea of, sure, there are things that have gone up in price and cost, less so this last year than in prior years, but that, budget makers should be looking for efficiencies and ways to offset the areas with higher costs. And so we've had, guidance of zero with a proviso that if there's something happening that makes that impossible to provide the desired level of service, come to advisory and explain why you're not meeting guidance. So that's what we've done. Could do something different this year if somebody has a sense that there's a direction that would be better to go. My observation would be that's worked pretty well in past years and puts a reasonably tight color around things with the obvious expectation and the reality that there will be some budget makers who come and say, this happened and that happened. And so to meet a reasonable level of service, we need to exceed guidance. And indeed, the overall budget last year outside of wages, went up more than our guidance. And so I think, the expectation would be that's a collar to try to restrain things. But I mean, again, we can go wherever we want during the course of the year. But that was how it went last year, and for many years that's been the pattern of guidance. Laura, I'll start with you and then Pam.
If there was a budget that last year went up materially, and maybe if it was a one-off thing, someone coming in who might not know that, right? So is there a way of seeing sort of historically what the budget has been and whether there was a spike that we might not expect that they would go back to pre-spike?
So Deb, you can fill in on this, but I think for each department budget, there will be a spreadsheet that will have numbers, including numbers for past years.
There's like the 3-year
3 years.
history,
Okay.
and then there's actually an average column, so you can kind of see what the 3-year average is, what the budget was for this current year, and then, kind of gives you some guidance. It's like, well, yeah, that 1 year it was really substantially higher, so the average is higher, but, that's not really where we should go with it or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're raising an issue that is important, I think, for all of us to be really mindful of, which is, if there was a one-off thing last year, that number might not be the right base. And so, building off that base might not be the right thing. If, last year you had this one-off thing, that's done, actually the budget should be coming down because you're not repeating that one-off thing. And that's absolutely something to be mindful about, and why seeing the 3-year history, makes it possible to see that, hey, in the prior year, there was a big jump. Let's understand where that came from and whether that's something that is one-off or something that will be sustained and so on.
Yeah, it is a little tricky in the fact that, so you're working on, like, we're gonna be budgeting for FY '26. you're gonna be working off the budget for FY '25 because you don't know what the actuals are for FY '25. I mean, we'll have year-to-date numbers, you know what I mean, but your year-to-date numbers will only be 6 months. So sometimes I can say, well, geez, you know, we budgeted $10,000 for electricity, but we're already at $10,000. So that's not really a good number to budget off of because our actual is gonna come in at $20,000. So, you know, we kind of give you that information as you go. So it's not all on the spreadsheet. There's a lot of conversation that can happen as well.
And Ariel, your role as liaison to have these conversations.
Yes.
Pen,
Well, thank you, because you actually sort of preempted me in part, because I have a note. Look at last year's bump. But I just want to say that one of the things I remember the discussion last year that it's been flat the guidance has been flat for years, but what happens, the pattern is department gets a bump and that becomes the basis for the next year. And I think you're exactly right. I think we should be looking more historically than I think advisory has. It's kind of like, oh, these are numbers. Oh, you meet them, or, you know, it's there, you know, the budget, if the budget were flat, it wouldn't have crept up every year over the course of the last 350 years. For sure.
and that also, right, reflects back on, if a budget maker's, oh, we're within guidance, you know, I shouldn't have to answer any questions. Well, maybe there's exactly the
Yeah.
issue that you're both talking about, that, well, actually, you know, flat isn't, you know, that maybe the
Yeah.
one-off thing should be reversed. Yeah. Paul?
One thing that might be helpful, Jeremy, could be for budget makers to sort of like list out any kind of changes. I remember through the discussions, things would come up, well, why is there a change over like 2 years ago? And often, and sometimes I remember the reason was, well, there was a position that was unfilled. And of course, then because it was unfilled, there was not the same amount of spend. But I found that some of these things kind of came up through a discussion, but maybe if budget makers know that there was a change either up and down for a particular reason, it might be helpful for us to see that ahead of time versus having it kind of come up through discussions. That might be helpful for budget makers as well as for us as a committee.
Deb and I will, when we meet with the budget makers, we'll put that bug in their ear.
That's great. That's great.
Stephen?
I think what could be helpful is to help us with a 30,000-foot view of the budget. And that is, if you took the 32 to 34 million budget, carved out the school system, you then left with payroll and some fixed costs like insurance and interest and other things. It would be interesting to know what percentage of the budget then remains. So we can kind of understand the scope of what we're working with. That would be helpful, I think, just as general information. My second comment, that was a request. This is a comment. Asking the department to budget at zero increase, exclusive of these one-time changes, is actually asking them for a budget cut. Because costs went up, you know, they go up probably in this area 3%. So you're actually asking the group to look for ways to reduce the budget. And is that the approach that we want to take? You know, the departments want to provide the services to the town. The town has a certain expectation. So by asking out of the box to say, you got to cut your budget, is that a reasonable request?
So here's I think what the thinking has been in past years on that. And, you know, you're absolutely right that costs go up. And so, you know, that in inflation adjusted terms, you know, amounts to a budget cut. The wage piece is set by the COLA. So it's, you know, not counting the wage piece, which is a very substantial part of many departments' budgets.
Right.
And so the logic for the remaining piece is that, yeah, there are costs that are going to go up, but let's be looking for efficiencies and, you know, consolidations and so on that might offset that. And if we were to proceed with, you know, the flat budget guidance, I'm very confident that in a number of department budget makers are going to come and say, you know, gasoline, you know, gas went up, electric went up. There is no way we can provide that level of service with a flat budget. And then, we have a conversation about that. And I think the view is that having that tighter collar leads to a more productive conversation than saying, yeah, budget should go up, whatever, 2% or 3%.
So you're looking
it's-
for, by making that request, you're looking for global zero.
Which we aren't going to get, because there are going to be a number of, well, at least, let me be careful how I say that. Who knows what's going to happen with the budget this year? But in past years, budget increase has typically been above guidance because a number of departments have come to advisory with, to provide what we think is the appropriate level of service. We can't do that at a flat budget. We need 1%, 1.5%, 2% more than that. And then, advisory has a decision to make about, do we want to, follow that budget maker's lead and make that recommendation to town meeting? Or do we want to say, well, no, that doesn't really sound right to us. We want to recommend something different.
So once we have this, if we're able to get that data that I mentioned in part one, it will kind of give us a feel, I think, on those variable costs, what the flexibility is.
Right. I was just gonna slip in a couple things on that. One, so that kind of a breakdown seems really interesting to me as well. Jeremy will, at that January 8th meeting, I think you're set up for this, is gonna do kind of a high-level budget overview with, all the budgets come in December 31, get rolled up, put it all together. Given the budget, here's what the total budget would be, here's what, given the requests, here's what the increase would be if those requests came to pass. Here are implications for, are we relative to Prop 2.5, and sort of a 30,000 foot level view. I was intending at our December meeting to do kind of my version of just a little budget background to kind of prime us. And that would seem like a natural time I'd be happy to do this, or can work with Jeremy or Deb to pull together some of those numbers. So that in December, we can say for, fiscal year 24 that's complete and at least budgeted for fiscal 25, here are those sorts of breakdowns that you talked about as kind of a setup with, where have we been? What do the numbers look like? That seems like a great pie chart table, or whatever the right format is to do. And then we'll get, the FY26 roll up from Jeremy in January.
And I'm not sure what revenue projections could help us as well. If there was a flat, no rate adjustment, what is projected revenue based upon new properties that came online, et cetera?
Yeah. So there'll be the piece from new properties that come online and a projection for the non-property tax revenue, which is only about 10% of total revenue, but I think there'd be a preliminary projection for that too.
Good, that'll all be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, the revenue piece matters too.
Yeah.
Paul.
So I was gonna make that very point about the revenue piece, because kind of the reality is, the town revenue is really not going up very much, naturally, kind of organically, because of, there are some new building proposals, right? But not kind of approved yet. So kind of the reality is, the revenue has been pretty flat, right? But going back and seeing the historical town revenue would be pretty helpful, as well as we also had many discussions about what are some things that the committee or the town in general has leverage to sort of change the revenue equation, which it turns out there aren't that many. There are some, right? Because that's the other reality. I think kind of a zero-based budget and that call that Dan talks about, it's partly because it's not like we haven't seen very much revenue in it. And there sort of aren't many levers for us to change that equation going forward.
I agree with you, and I think putting that into context page is very helpful to the team.
Some of that is also useful information, I think, for us to include in, the April advisory committee report, is trying to communicate some of that for those who read that report, to try to communicate it to, folks in town. It's everybody in town, right, Jeremy, who reads that? Everybody, of course, that brilliant prose. Other thoughts on budget guidance and just kind of preliminary thoughts on, where that might land? Again, hoping that in 2 weeks we can, specifically agree on and vote on a number, but.
I'm sorry to ask this next question.
All good.
There are some obligations that are fixed already for pay adjustments through on the contract?
Yes.
Is there a way to understand what those percentage increases are as well?
Interesting, you should ask. I just have
Did I
to
set you up?
I just have to have some notes here. So when, I mean, maybe this is a segue into talking about COLA and so on. So let me maybe just set that question aside for just a minute. Other thoughts, comments on just budget guidance and whether the flat budget guidance, at least preliminarily, seems like a sensible way to proceed, and again, we can add text to the letter to provide some context and nuance around whatever we propose, Pat.
Yeah, just sort of, speaking sort of big picture, human nature sort of thing. There's a general tendency in departments, and not just in Sherborn, but globally, the idea that I have to spend what I get this year, so I can ask for the same next year. So I think budget makers coming and saying, oh, I didn't need as much money this year. I won't need as much money this year as I needed last year. I don't think that typically happens. I think there's a tendency, even if I think there's, in some of these, there's more squish than we will see as an outsider. And so asking flat actually allows for that squish to be absorbed where, painlessly where it may exist in some departments.
I will have to say that happened years ago,
Mhm.
but over the last 5 years, that doesn't happen.
Okay,
Like,
good.
and we were pretty strict about, like, in June, you're not ordering office supplies, you're not ordering that, you're
Right.
not, doing that. We really kind of changed that attitude. So
Oh,
that
good.
doesn't really
Okay.
happen here
That's good.
like it did years ago.
And I don't want to put words in Jeremy's mouth, but I think, well, two thoughts. One, it's kind of our job as advisory, if we think that's happening as
Right.
Deb said, I think it is happening much less than before, but if we see that it does seem like it's happening somewhere, that's kind of our job to figure out and call out. Also, Jeremy's going to get budget requests before December 31, before they get transmitted, and he's going to have conversations with budget makers. And I think Jeremy is, if he sees places where things like that are happening, I think he's going to call them out and make them go away before we even see the budgets.
Yeah, I will say, but Jeremy was last year was Jeremy's first full budget process, and that was the first time we sat down with all the budget makers before we went to advisory, and that was really helpful. I think that was very beneficial, so you'll see the results of that again.
Shall
I just was thinking about, in our guidance letters to the departments, would it make any sense if they had an idea of things that would be coming up that may not be for the fiscal 2026 budget, but that might be something that they already are aware of for like 27 or 28, that maybe we ask for some kind of comment on that, like anything that's not gonna fall within the next, you know what I mean? So it can just be something that we're aware of, so that it's not something we're hearing about.
And that's one
December
of the reasons-
31st, like we have a little bit more lead time on that.
And that's one of the reasons we're starting to try to pull together the budget as a whole for you folks, is that in our discussions with folks, we're trying to get a little forward on those things. There's, say, the police dispatch is one of those things that currently we're getting paid, there's a state grant that's paying for it, but not in FY 26, but FY 27, the town will have to absorb that cost for the regional dispatch center. So there are some big picture things like that. Tri-County is another one that, we've modified the way the town has done some of the budgeting in the past so that Deb and I can help you folks all plan for these changes in the future budgets.
And I think just building on that, I think there's also been a kind of growing effort to do some longer term budget forecasting to sort of spin out, on the path we're on and given the things that we know are coming, what would the budget picture look like over the next 5 years?
So one of the things is in the town of Sherborn does not have a town charter that sets up your government. It's sort of evolved over the years and is defaults to Mass General Law. So there are many things like financial planning and long-term planning that don't sit anywhere officially. So we're hoping to fill those gaps, but officially there's no authority under the town administrator or the advisory or the select board for that matter for long-range planning, financial planning. A gap that should be addressed at some point to clarify.
I mean, in past years, I spun up a 5-year forecast, just because I thought we needed one, and there wasn't one there. I think Jeremy and Deb are, working on some version of that this year. So I think, we'll have something that provides sort of on the current path, a bit of a look ahead. And as you said, I think it'd be great to include in the, in our letter, that if there are big items coming in future years, it would be really helpful for us to know about them. Some of those will be capital items, and those will be in the 5-year capital plan, but we'll see. Speaking of which, I just got an updated 5-year capital plan from the regional school committee, which I will circulate around to folks for people to see. Other thoughts on budget guidance before we pick up on Stephen's question about COLAs and all? People generally comfortable with flat guidance? Again, we aren't going to make a decision until next week, but does that kind of feel?
To me, generally, that's not controversial, super controversial as a matter of guidance.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
right.
To the budget
Yeah.
makers, they're not gonna be shocked.
No, they're not going to be shocked. I think if,
Business as usual.
I think if it changed, I think there would be, I think there'd be considerable surprise. Okay, so then pivoting to COLA. So just a little, just a few refresher numbers. One, so the COLA does not cover union employees, because union employees are covered by collective bargaining agreements, which comes to Stephen's question. So it, I think Deb looked up the numbers today, and the count of the number of people affected by this is 47, but 6 of them are something like a minutes clerk for a committee who gets paid a stipend of a few $1,000s a year. So effectively, it's probably, and there are a couple vacant positions, so it's probably closer to 40 people, although there's also a group of on-call firefighters who would get COLA. So it's really sort of 40, more or less 40-ish people plus some on-call firefighters. So each percentage,
20 to 30 of them, but they're part-time.
Not full-time.
For calls.
Right.
It's
Right.
not, they're not, it's not apples to apples with a
Right.
full-time employee.
How many were there last year? Do you have the number from last year?
of what?
The COLA, like who?
Yeah, I'm going to show those.
Oh,
I've got-
okay, all
I've got
right.
those on the table.
Thank
When we
you.
get to that. And each percentage point of COLA, again, it's just covering the non-union employees. It's about $29,000. So, if one's comparing a COLA of 2% to 3%, the difference, the budget implication is about $29,000. Just by way of background. Let me pop up that document I did if I can. Get that to share. Okay, so I presume people looked at this, so I'll spin through this reasonably quickly and just highlight the couple of numbers I added. I take the message from the first page to be that inflation has come down a lot. It's getting back close to pre-pandemic rates of inflation. Getting back to pre-pandemic rates of inflation. And I can see I mislabeled under the category, the all civilian, that should just be overall headline CPI, top line CPI. I mislabeled that. And the extra column I added at the end that wasn't in the version I sent around the FY26 that is a forecast from the Congressional Budget Office of what the rate of change in the consumer price index will be over the period of FY '26 that we're discussing a COLA for. And again, just illustrates that inflation's coming down, Federal Reserve has started cutting interest rates in response to that.
What's that FY '26
And
number
so on.
again? I can't read it well.
Oh, it's 2.2.
2.2.
See
It's
if I
also
can,
above your
It's
rate.
right behind you too.
see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There, okay, that's a little better. And people aren't forecasting the Boston, Cambridge, Newton thing. So I didn't put in a forecast for that. And as you can see, the Boston, Cambridge, Newton thing are much more volatile than the overall numbers. I also pulled together some numbers for a statistic called the Employment Cost Index, which is kind of the premier government statistics on wage changes. So this is percent changes in wages, top line, all civilian workers, and then some categories of state and local government employees. You can see that with higher inflation, wages nationwide for everybody, and also for categories of state and local workers went up a lot. Those numbers have been coming down. And the FY '26 number over at the right is again, Congressional Budget Office. It's actually a June forecast, so it's a little bit stale, but it's the latest that they had of their forecast over the period that would be covered by the COLA. And then to come to Nora's question, here is the history of COLAs in Sherborn in recent years. So last year, 3.5. The year that is the one that was approved last year, which is for FY '25, which is what's underway now. So what people saw as a salary bump on July 1 was 3.5. A year prior, 4.5. A year prior, 4. Again, mirroring the higher inflation rates, higher overall wage increases. And for many years before that, it was 2%. So in the era, kind of the pre-pandemic era before inflation picked up, pretty consistently, COLAs were about 2% in Sherborn. And then final few numbers, where is it? Here we are. Social Security folks will get a bump, COLA in January. And that is going to be 2.5%, given the formula that they use for calculating Social Security COLA. The president proposed for all federal workers to go into effect in January for 2025, a 2% increase. That's not final because it's got to go through a bunch of congressional stuff, but usually the president's recommendation holds. And then becomes Stephen's question on collective bargaining agreements. So the Department of Public Works is just now finished negotiating a contract, but I think that still hasn't been inked by select board members and everybody else. So I think they basically negotiated it out, but those numbers aren't available. So DPW, that is the contract that would go into effect in 26, right? Or in 25?
25.
25.
Retro to
To July 1. Okay.
There's 2 collective bargaining agreements that are relative to the town budgets, Public Works and the Police Department.
And then the schools,
Schools.
which is not directly which the town isn't directly negotiating. For police, their contract extended from fiscal 23 to 25, and then they will be negotiating a new contract for 26.
The reps have yet to reach out to the select board to begin that negotiation, but we expect that soon.
Okay. So in that prior contract, which would have been negotiated before a lot of the crazy stuff with inflation, I think it had COLAs of about 2%. So they're probably going to be looking for some makeup, as a guess. But the 2%, it's kind of an apples to oranges comparison because there are other things that happen in that contract that provide opportunities for additional compensation beyond just the straight COLA with provisions for.
Yeah, to put the COLA that you're talking about now for your budget guidance into perspective, that's all in for those employees. There's no other compensation adjustment by way of performance or years in the job or anything. That's that COLA is it. It's really more of a salary adjustment than a COLA. So just to put that in perspective, if you're comparing that against the collective bargaining agreements that may have, all of them do have steps for years of experience. So the COLAs that get applied to those CBAs are in addition to the steps that that person may earn. In the case of the teacher's contract, there's also liens. So depending on years of educational experience, they go to another lane with different steps. Again, not the case for what you're talking about. This is all in everything. There is no current salary adjustment process here in Sherborn for performance or merit.
Yeah, and to give an example of what a big deal that is, in school contract, which I think runs through FY '26. And again, the town doesn't directly negotiate that, school committees negotiate that with the teachers union.
There generally is a select board representative.
Right.
As part of that. I believe they're in here too now.
Oh, George Morrill did last time, and now the expectation is one from Sherborn and one from Dover?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that contract goes through, I think, FY '26. The COLA is 3%. But the other things that Jeremy was talking about, the steps and the lanes, in terms of what's the average salary increase, about 4.5. So the steps and lanes are adding a lot, which again, to come to Jeremy's point, just says caution is required when comparing COLAs because there is a modest longevity bonus for Sherborn employees, but otherwise it's just COLA. There aren't, that after 5 years in service, you jump up to a higher salary level. It's just COLA. So, care is required in doing these comparisons. All right, so that was some background info. We will get a recommendation from Personnel Board, and then we will have a decision to make about where we want to land. And again, hoping we can agree on and vote on a number in a couple of weeks. So preliminary thoughts, reactions? Nora?
So actually, my question was not the percentages over the years,
Oh,
but
yeah,
how
okay.
many people did it affect? For example,
Oh, okay,
40
sorry. I
people
misunderstood.
versus 30 people versus 20 people,
It's relatively the same.
Relatively same, but we did, when we combined the treasurer collector's office, that was a reduction in.
Right.
staffing. So,
Mhm.
it's somewhat consistent, but it has trended a little down as a result of
I
that.
think that would be important to have in our data. Just would be interesting if we could.
I mean, maybe stating the obvious, the big trade-off here, of course, is wanting to fairly compensate employees and not have employees, salaries fall behind either what's fair or, what's competitive with respect to, what the labor market looks like on the one hand, and on the other hand, of course, looking out for taxpayers and trying to be mindful of those budget pressures. Stephen?
When these adjustments go, let's say let me back up. If the COLA is 3%, making up the number, is that to every employee not under a collective bargaining agreement?
Yes.
I'm sure there's been discussion about saying to a department, you have a pot of money, which represents 3% of your payroll. You have the ability to give someone 0 or something more than 3.
Yeah.
Has that been dismissed as a concept? Or has that just caused more problems than it's worth?
That's a novel concept, for sure.
Yeah.
It is, in the last 2 years, at least since I've been here, we've started talking about it, but it's a novel concept that is not yet taken place.
I think some years ago, before my time of being, deeply involved in budget things, that came up and there was, I think, a lot of resistance with, wouldn't be fair, people would play favorites. And so I think there were pretty strong sentiments, which is, as Jeremy says, it would be a novel thing, pretty strong sentiments against it.
Yeah.
I personally am a fan of that kind of a system, and think that that would be a way to reward strong performers. But, that has not been the pattern in Sherborn. for
Yeah,
a long
and
time.
it really was not looked upon favorably because we're so small. I mean, a department is 3 people.
Yeah.
So if the department head gets a 5% increase, and decides not to give their clerk or anybody else any percentage, well, those clerks have no say. You know what I mean? It's like, there's 3 people in the department, so it's not really,
And everybody knows.
yeah, everybody knows.
Right,
I mean, because it's a public record. Everybody knows what everybody makes. You can look up right now to see any individual that works for the town makes.
Yeah, because, by position rather than name, everybody's salary is going to be in the documents that we're seeing when we're looking at.
Another spin on that is to have a base actual COLA and then budget for an additional performance-based amount.
Yeah.
And not have it just a pot of money per department, so they're, thinking they're being treated unfairly, but just have that available for performance-based merit awards. But then you'd be thinking about your COLA in a different way, right?
Because it'd be the base plus, right, then you need to think about what's the overall salary budget and how to allocate that between base and merit performance pay. Paul?
Yeah, like it would seem like the other thing we're trying to do with COLA is employee retention, right? Keep good kind of employees. So I wonder, Jeremy, if you can comment on what's the kind of environment been like as far as retaining employees? Has that been difficult or?
Well, I mean, we don't have a huge staff, so, any loss is a big one for us. It's not a whole lot of feature. Ability for us to train from within. So it becomes important that way. And we do have a lot of positions that are shy of full-time because one, the workload might not be there, or, however it's been structured over the years. When people either retire or leave from those positions that are short of full-time, it's a challenge to fill because those positions work really well for the people that are in them, work with their lifestyle, but
Has anyone left because of
attracting
salary?
somebody in a less experienced that wants to grow into that position, they're more than likely looking for that full-time role. So that's a challenge for us to fill.
One kind of question then, so that makes sense. Has anyone left in the past year because of salary? Like moved to a similar position like in another town?
Not directly, but there has been there has been some issues that we've addressed over the past year, yes.
And there's also coming, Jeremy, right, some state law that's going to require a bit of a
Correct.
fresh look at
State
salary
law,
levels.
it's a salary equity or salary fairness act. I can't remember the exact term, but what it's going to require us to do is to have published salary ranges for all of our positions. So we'll have to develop those salary ranges, have it published, not only when we advertise for a position, but any existing staff could request it. We'll have to have that. We don't currently have that. We have what's budgeted, and there's no range.
I think one big challenge and big unknown is that right in the whole COVID period, in the economy as a whole, wage structures really changed pretty significantly. And exactly how that's going to shake out and what the implications are for, folks in jobs like town hall, I think, hasn't, my sense is that hasn't completely settled out yet and still, to be sorted out over the next couple of years with, how did that all work out and what do people expect to be paid for doing different kinds of jobs, since obviously pay structures around the economy changed a lot. Yeah.
I think we've done this for at least some of the positions, but I don't know if we've done it universally to kind of do a study, even for existing filled positions, how they compare with similar roles in surrounding areas and whether we need to make some adjustments just to.
That's essentially what we're going to be needing to do to comply with this new Mass General law. So we have scoped it out with a consultant that will just do a market study. They'll look at our positions, compare them to other like communities, and help us get a range, help us get put together a classification compensation plan. And also as a follow-up, it will help us update our job descriptions as well, which we've been working on, but having a consultant help with would be helpful. So actually, tomorrow night I'll ask for the select board to fund that with ARPA funds, federal funds, to fund that study, get that underway, so we have compliance for next year.
It's a good time to do that, given all the changes in wage structures, and there might be probably some positions that'll be, yeah, okay, that's about right, and others will probably be some surprises.
So it doesn't, that act doesn't require us to actually change an
Right.
actual salary, we
Right.
just have to have a published range. So
Right.
we're gonna find a whole mix of where people lie within that range that we find is what is appropriate for Sherburne. Some may be in the middle, some may be low end, some may be over that range. We're gonna find a mix. And what we do from there remains to be seen. We'll see.
Then the fun begins.
Then,
You know,
I was gonna go to Laura and then Nora, back to you.
Okay.
Laura, go ahead.
Sorry, there was a comment about how, for some consolidation reasons, the number of people coming under this has actually gone down.
Yep.
Where, in this process, would a request for a new head count come?
it would come through this budget process.
Okay,
So that would be something that a budget maker would want to or need to request for the next fiscal year. So it would be as part of this process.
okay. But it wouldn't be, this would be for the non-union, right? The union part of it gets in somewhere else.
The budget would need to accommodate for any additional staff in the union occupied positions as
Oh, I
well.
see, okay,
Yeah, if the police wanted
If
to
they needed to change
expand,
staffing, they would need a budget for that.
okay,
that would come through the same
okay,
process.
okay.
You know, the salary and benefits would be as determined by the collective bargaining agreement, but as Jeremy said, the budget would have to accommodate that if that was something the town decided to do. Nora?
and then I think just dovetailing on what you were saying, Jeremy, regarding smaller towns is having consulting, when towns share someone. As opposed to, larger towns like
Yeah, I
Sandy.
think that's an opportunity Sherburne needs to continue to explore. Sharon, a sustainability coordinator, Sharon, a conservation agent. Anything else we can. Of course, that requires a partner in that endeavor. And so we
I just didn't know if that was gonna be incorporated into the same.
yeah, I think as positions become available, I think that we really need to look at everything, see what we can share. Unfortunately, sometimes sharing may drive up the costs. And
Yeah,
that
it's-
remains to be seen,
Mhm.
whether it's your officer. You'll get a lot more information soon. I'll be talking to Penn as the liaison soon.
That has to do with changed requirements for what
Change
someone in that
federal
town
requirements, get the training required to be a veteran services officer, to work at least 1,000 hours a year. And your veteran services officer gets $500 stipend to do that work.
that figure something else out. Yeah. Other thoughts, reactions, or other information people would want before our next meeting? All right, so we'll, have to see where we want to. I tried to provide some kind of background data to put some, range around that discussion. I was, resist tossing a number out because we'll see what the personnel board says Friday. We should probably wait and see what they say. Yeah.
I'm being called to log into the Board of Health meeting.
Oh, okay. We're just about done. We're going to just talk for a minute about the team improvement. So I think we're good. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Do you want me to shut everything down when we're done?
No, I'm just gonna be down in my office.
Okay.
I can.
Well, I'll shut down as much as I can. Okay, great.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Everybody's good? No other information requests that help us get there? Okay. Okay, all right. Well then,
Nothing, I'm just,
go ahead.
no, I just like, and you're like, but.
Well, I'm kind of doing my Wellesley professor thing and trying to kind of give everybody the hard stare to make sure that nobody has a comment
I
that
was
they
waiting for you to
want to
say
make.
Bueller.
That they're just kind of holding back on. So that's why I'm just,
No, I think we're good.
All right, okay. So let's go to minutes. So I sent a draft around. I can pop them up if necessary on the screen, but did anybody have any comments, suggestions, corrections on minutes? My hard Wellesley professor stare. Okay, then would welcome a motion to approve minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, great. All right, let's do a roll call. Shall we? We'll start with you. Yeah.
Aye.
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 Okay, and I might as well. So we're there 8-0. Okay. So I think we're set unless anybody has any other things to bring up. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And great. And roll call, Shelley.
Aye.
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 Nora.
Aye.
Ken.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
And I might as well. So 8-0 at 8:14. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.